But both of those things actually go against the negative narrative that exists in media right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you for sharing that, man. And it's important that we understand that. And I don't want to make light of the real estate component there either, because as you bring up redlining, as you bring up housing, as we talked about the how media will shape a narrative that plays out against us, we've got to come up with ways and means of dealing with of these narratives, and then also dealing with the implications that the stereotypes that are out there, impact us economically, whether it becomes how we are assessed when we're trying to buy a home, right? If we don't put these truths up, right, and illuminate the truth, then we allow those false narratives to play out and live and exist. And so there are a couple of solutions that we need to kind of highlight that we will get to as to how we deal with it. But I want to I want to prepare us for where we're going next, because our next book club session, let me make sure I got the date right, but our next book club session, and you'll see notice for this, we will have MG, the mortgage guy, very own professor, very own MG. Shout out to MG, the mortgage guy, who will be on to talk about his new book, The Real Estate Investor's Manifesto. So if you read House Hackonomics, you know that our brother gets busy. If you've ever seen MG get busy, you know that it's official and it goes down when he's present. And so please tell a friend to tell a friend. If you have not tapped into the community, they want to make sure that they do. And if you haven't, if this is your first time tapping into the book club, we are going to transition into looking at the next book through the lens of MG, the mortgage guy, and his expertise. And so I'm looking at that date will be, the book releases on the 9th. And so we won't meet again until the 18th, and we'll have our brother with us to chop it up and get busy, and to learn all the jewels and the insights that led him to writing in such a book, but then also to prepare us to break down some of the stereotypes that exist, to see through the propaganda, and then to also now think about how we can build generational wealth through the means of investing in real estate. And so I'm always impressed every time I get a chance to listen to MG, and we get to hear his expertise. So if you don't know who MG the mortgage guy is, please check him out on Rents and Gems. He's dropping knowledge with our sister Kiana Watson. So make sure that you tap in and tune into that. I want to come back to this website real quick too, to highlight what to look for, right? So the book that Tiffany Cross's book also gives us some things to look for when we are introduced, or when false narratives pop up. So just how I looked into her article and said, that New York Post article, and said, wow, look at these false narratives that are in 2 paragraphs, right? That create a characterization of someone, or to demean that person in such a way, just with using a couple of words in an article, to discredit or to decharacterize her as someone who was a radical in the sense of causing disruption, or was going out all out, like they're trying to describe a mobster, and we're looking at her as a sister who is speaking truth, and as a journalist and being responsible to the truth. And so a couple of ways that were highlighted in the book, when you think about false media narratives, I want us to make sure we be careful, be mindful of who you receive your talking points from, because a lot of what we do in our community is take talking points from popular TV shows, whether it be politics, whether it be popular podcasts that that sometimes sound off base, or influencers, right? Be careful of where you're getting your talking points from. But when we think about it from the media lens, think about unemployment. She highlights in the book, through the national unemployment rate, though the national unemployment rate is the lowest in 50 years, a stat often touted by media outlets, they really add the footnote that this figure primarily reflects white employment dynamics, not Black folks. This is also not to declare that unemployment rates are not improving, but this improvement certainly has not translated into a broader economic gains for Black workers. So, I mean, that's important, because how often do politicians, people in the media tout that, oh, look at the unemployment rate, it's at an all-time low. Well, that doesn't mean that it's an all-time low in our community. That just means that predominantly the people that they're polling and they're looking at tend to not look like us. Because truly, if you wanted to look at the unemployment rate, you would have an aggregate of all of us or the people who are being impacted the most by injustice, right? So think about when we think about poverty, right? The system brings up the white media elites assigned to perpetuate, they're assigned to perpetuate two mythical tales of poverty. One for white folks, the undeserved and the confounding, right? The economic anxiety that is attached to your conservative evangelical voter in this climate, versus for us being the self-inflicted and to be expected, meaning a tragedy of our own doing, right? An injustice of our own doing. Looking at ourselves through our problems that have historically and structurally been a part of our country for years, and blaming it on our lack of responsibility or commitment to uplifting our own people. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King, you know, in a famous interview, you know, said it's distasteful, it's hurtful to tell a man to pick up his own bootstraps when he doesn't have boots. And so, you know, at times this media tends to blame, victim blame, instead of creating a true narrative of what's really been going on in our society. And voting, right? So this is one of these things that stands out and very important, especially if you are in Atlanta. Make sure you go out and vote. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I would definitely tell you to listen to the candidates themselves. Certainly, if you are in Atlanta, you should have some question as to how and why Herschel Walker has gotten into the race. And that's no, you know, slight at him, but we should be more aware of how candidates have decided to run and what they're running for. But voting, right? So the media frequently gets Black voter loyalty wrong in their diagnosis of our political preference. It's not that Black voters overwhelmingly like or dislike one candidate or another. For many, the power of white supremacy is so prevalent in the functioning of our democracy that Black voters never want to chance their vote on someone white America will not support. And that's a fact, right? And this is done in the Democratic primaries, emphasizing the point that Black voters have always known that racism is a bipartisan issue. Now, I think that's important to pause there, because much of us have all been exposed to the narrative that's out there, that Black people vote for the Democratic Party, and why is that, and blah blah blah. And I think we have to understand that where that has been shaped and why that's been shaped, and then to speak truth to it. Right? We are faced with the backdrop of white supremacy present, whether it be in the politics, investing, economics. So we are working in the backdrop against these structural forces that are in play. That's why it makes entrepreneurship so integral to our development and our growth as a community. Working out and seeing how we can overcome some of these challenges requires us to challenge this kind of double consciousness that, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois spoke about when we did the book Stanford Remix, being one of this duality of fighting against a structure of white supremacy that's intended to harm us and to keep us as a second class, or fighting against stereotypes, right, that are intended to, you know, psychologically, you know, keep us disadvantaged within our own selves, keeping us on the sidelines, feeling like we don't have a place, right? And so much of what our battle is, it tends to get caught up in these two areas. And I think what this movement and other movements like it introduce to us and remind us that there's an authenticity about being who we are, that entrepreneurship, that learning more, being educated, teaching each other, building social media platforms becomes a way for us, one, to control our narrative, but also to empower our people without the filter of white supremacy being present.